Hi everyone. What we have here is that every tourist starts with this map. It doesn't really matter whether you can read or cannot. It's just about to give you the outline. And we have walked pretty much, not everywhere, but the most touristy areas that cover, I would say, 60% or 70% of the screen. Uh, well, uh, we know very well. From the Neva River, which is in the upper section of the image, till the Fontanka River, which is in the lower section. This is called the downtown. This is the area that pretty much was the center of attention, the focus of attention of the city planners and architects. And this is where most St. Petersburgers live. That's so-called the downtown of St. Petersburg, or the old city of St. Petersburg. However, the area we're exploring today, it's for a long time it was considered just the wilderness and the countryside, but it's only, I would say, 10 minutes walk by bridge. And this is it. I'm talking about the Trinity Bridge. And the Trinity Bridge, that I don't have a pointer, but in the center, in the upper center, you see the kind of a fortress, an island and the fortress. This is Peter and Paul Fortress. That's the cradle of the city. And to the right hand side, there is an island, and the island that connects the bridge that connects that island with the mainland, kind of the main island. That's the Trinity Bridge. We sailed it. We have sailed under it. We crossed it on multiple tours. Here it is, Trinity Bridge. That's the bridge that kind of changed everything, because it connected this island, so-called City Island, with the central part of St. Petersburg, and so that happened in 1903. The bridge was inaugurated, and ever since then, Kamień Ostrovsky has become, and it's still like this, has become a kind of a quiet downtown, a very, I would say, upscale neighborhood with beautiful architecture. And 1903, this is the time of Art Nouveau in its prime, and that's why you can see a lot of Art Nouveau buildings there. But as you can see, there is, the pin. This is basically a screenshot from my Google Maps. What we need to see here is the pin is on Kamień Ostrovsky 44. Kamień Ostrovsky is the name of the avenue. There's no way I expect you to understand what it means, but it actually means the avenue that takes you to the Stone Island. That's one of the islands, actually, the greenish island you can see before Novaya Derevnya place. That's the Stone Island. That's where the avenue kind of takes you to, and that's where we are planning to wrap up my series of tours of this avenue. And the area, the avenue kind of crosses multiple islands, in fact. And now we are on Aptekersky Island, or the Pharmacist Island. The area is called so because on this island there, ever since the beginning of St. Petersburg, the start of the city, there were medicinal herbal garden, a lot of the future botanical garden, and also this is where the family of German pharmacists settled and lived. But for a long time, the buildings looked like that. It's like a countryside, and those look like countryside buildings. Just that. Very quiet, very green, and I would say there are still a few buildings. Well, there's still, okay, a couple of buildings from that period that you can find. And also, to me, this side is called Petrogradsky side, Petrogradsky neighborhood, is probably the most authentic, just like the Vasilyevsky Island. The downtown no longer feels that authentic to me because, okay, I'm talking, this is my narrative before 2022. And because I haven't been to my city since March 2022, and I don't know, I no longer know actually. I don't think I know any longer what it actually feels like. I really wish I could go there, but I will not, at least not at this point. But the downtown is still very touristy and crowded, and too many cars. So if you want kind of a more authentic feel of the city, that's definitely, well, one of the two places I would definitely take you to. So this is the bridge I'm talking about, the Trinity Bridge, that's kind of changed everything for that neighborhood, and it's very quickly became a prominent upscale neighborhood, very highly, I would say, highly developed, lots of construction, lots of streets, and lots of tenant buildings. And well, tenant building, just to remind you, well, because I understand that, well, we have some, I would say, quite new viewers, well, also I'm sharing recordings on my YouTube channel, which means anyone can all of a sudden come across my videos. So I'll quickly fill you in. Tenant house is basically a house that belongs to a company or, well, it's just somebody's property. And you can rent apartments in this house. And that's basically it. And most of the housing is exactly these tenant houses. 95%, I would say. The rest would be, well, okay, 90% is the tenant houses, 5% is private homes, mansions, country houses, and also different institutions, mostly educational facilities and hospitals that started to emerge here in the 19th century because it was kind of the green area far from the downtown, and it was very quiet, so it was perfect for hospitals and also for educational facilities such as boarding schools. The House of Kaplun, well, Kaplun is a Jewish name, and we know that the person who owned it was a merchant, and we know for sure that this was not just kind of a middle kind of, well, middle class merchant, so to speak, because St. Petersburg, almost up until the revolution, at least up until the manifesto of 1905, it was not, Jews were not allowed to settle and work in St. Petersburg unless they were students, unless they were merchants with a certain, I would say, annual income. That we know. And since it's the House of Kaplun, we understand that this was definitely a like big time businessman. There is not so much information about him. We know that Kaplun was buried in the Jewish cemetery. And by the way, it's kind of a little bit of teaser. I know not everyone likes cemeteries, but I think it's a perfect location. It's a perfect destination for a Halloween themed tour. So I'm planning to take you to a Jewish cemetery for my Halloween tour. Just planning. Let me know later on in the chat if you're interested, because there are a bunch of stories I can share with you. Honestly, it's not about the cemetery and spooky thing, which is also a case, but it's not about that. It's about the stories and the people that I could tell you about. So anyway, and we don't even know where the Kaplun's grave is, but we know that he was buried in the Jewish cemetery. But I've never really looked into it. Maybe there is information, but it's not really that obvious. It's not so easy to find. And this is I would say it maybe not so typical northern Art Nouveau, but these styles are very, very typical. So there are a lot of houses decorated in such a way. There's these tiles, and we call them piglet tiles. I told you about it before because at the backside they have like two holes, like basically piglet's nose. So that's why we call them kabanchik, like a piglet nose tiles. And there are a lot of buildings in St. Petersburg and in Russia built in Art Nouveau style, and this type of tiles are, I would say, they're in abundance. This one of the, I would say, typical features and typical details and design techniques used for Art Nouveau period. And it's also, I would say, I like the design. I like the area. Well, the plot is quite challenging, and I like how they managed to fit the house into this challenging plot. It's a corner building, and I have never been to this building, but I would say, from a chat of people who live in Petrograd side, there is a Facebook group and there is a big chat, and I have access to that chat because actually Misha's apartment is in that area. They have some policy there. So we know that the apartment that are located exactly in the corner are spacious and quite lovely. So that's nice. At least that's nice. Another house which is well, it belonged to Bernstein. We don't know who this Bernstein was. He could have been a German. He could have been a Jew. German and Jewish last names are quite similar. We don't know. There's not so much information, but this is the perfect example of Northern Art Nouveau. There's a northern stone, use of local materials. It's an important idea, kind of a concept of Art Nouveau. Local stone and Northern Art Nouveau is northern because of the dark stones that normally can be found. You can't find white marble. You can't even find yellow marble in these areas, but you can find a lot of dark granite. And use of dark granite is, I would say, a significant feature of Northern Art Nouveau, Finnish Art Nouveau, Swedish Art Nouveau, and the same goes with St. Petersburg. Plus the combination of different techniques for the facade decoration. It could be well, just the stone, or it could be the plaster. It could be combination. It could be tiles. It could be different different combinations. And I like the way they've been working. They worked with this in this house. Also, the place that I one of my favorite places to eateries. It's called Linfers. It's the kind of a pie place, and they had a very good lemon pie, Linfers. Um, I know I have a friend. His name he's from Finland, so his last name is Linfers. So whenever I went to Linfers, I would text him, look, I'm having your lemon pie, lemon cake. They had some pies and cakes, so I'm having your lemon cake, and I would often ask for a discount, but no discount was ever provided to me. I like to find old photos. So this house, the amazing thing is that even the tower is still there, because a lot of houses that used to have towers lost those towers. I don't know how exactly that happened, but because of the revolution, because of the Second World War, a lot of buildings, because of the bombings, a lot of buildings eventually lost the towers, and some of them were restored in the post-war times, but some were not. Okay, and this house has a courtyard. You see, cordonner. It's a French word. It's basically a small kind of a garden. Not every house has that, and normally a distinguished house would have a cordonner. There is no place for a cordonner in the kind of central area of St. Petersburg. You can't find houses like that because in most cases the buildings in, let's say, in the entire St. Petersburg, they have the so-called the red line of buildings, where buildings are placed one next to another, like one wall next to the other, without any space, without any lanes or avenues. But in Petrogradsky Island, these things were possible because there was much space, because, especially if someone, let's say, um, some people basically became rich overnight. Some people had a plot of land before the bridge was built. They had a plot of land. Some would have a bigger plot of land, and they would have like their small country house there where they would escape from the heat and the smells of the city during the summer. They would escape to Petrogradsky Island. And that was it, just a small country house. And then when the prices quadrupled, maybe even they increased, I think, tenfold. These people became super rich, and they could afford that. So the coordinator is still there, and it's lovely. The amazing thing is that you can actually enter the coordinator, because the entrance to the building would be to the lobbies would be through the coordinator. And a house like that, I mean, you can see clearly that's not an Art Nouveau. It looks very Finnish, very Swedish. The dark stone, the plaster, well, it's very typical, I would say, for St. Petersburg, for this area. And well, I mentioned there was a big project for the restoration of stained glass. As you can see from the old photo, clearly this lobby had some intricate design. So this is just a lobby. So for tenant houses, a significant feature of a tenant house, a big residential building, would be beautiful lobbies because, you judge book by the cover, and if you have a beautiful lobby, well, kind of the idea. They can charge you more and everything and everything. So during the Soviet period, most of the stained glass, in general, stained glass detail perished in the wars, in the Soviet times. And well, there is a project, a big volunteers project that still exists, by the way. They're still working on restoration, cleaning, preservation of the stained glass details. And in this house, some of the lobbies still have this beautiful stained glass details, and now there are more because of the thanks to the project, because thanks to the initiative of the local people. Uh, well, I know we have some tile fans. I always pay attention to the tile work. This is quite, I would say, an intricate tile work design, Medlach tile, obviously. And what I particularly like is that sometimes people sell their apartments because the apartments now are all private property, unless this is a communal apartment, which is also the case. I told you that there are still about 40,000 communal apartments in St. Petersburg. This is still a lot. And but nevertheless, most people own their property, and they sometimes sell it. And there are photos that you can find, on different real estate agencies' website, apartment for sale. And well, you can sometimes find incredible photos of beautiful interiors, or let's say some fireplace or some elements, a design element that have survived this past century. And this is quite amazing, quite amazing. Or sometimes you can find, we kind of have a sort of a Russian version of eBay. There is a similar website where you can just sell your stuff. Or sometimes it's similar, maybe it's similar to Facebook Marketplace. Well, nevertheless, well, sometimes people sell their fireplaces because they no longer need them. I, they can sell the tiles. You can find different things on these websites, and there are people who are after these things, and people who are, well, who make sure no rules, no rules of listed houses are violated. So it's a big deal in St. Petersburg. But what I wanted to show you is that in this house you can find these absolutely gorgeous fireplaces and stoves. I mean, look at this decoration. I'm just in love with this design. Absolutely. Have a look. It's a bear that's holding, I'm not sure what the bear is holding in his hand. It's like a big stick or a mop. I don't understand. I don't really know. But look at this. This is the perfect example of how Art Nouveau should work. Art Nouveau is the use of local materials in decoration, in building, is the use of local motives and your culture elements for the decoration, because it's your nature, it's your surroundings and your environment. And look, this is amazing. So we have bears, we have pine cones, and this is just lovely, absolutely lovely. I find this absolutely fascinating. Perfect kind of Russian Art Nouveau exhibit here. And this fireplace is in a very good condition, and it's in one of the apartments in this building. Look at this fireplace. Huh? That's a ceiling in one of the apartments, and people put it up on the website, so it's not really a violation of anything. It's not an intrusion. People share these photos, so that's it. This house over here is a new one. It was built in early 2010s, And this is an example of actually of how you can build a modern edifice and it wouldn't really stand out from the rest of the area. It would blend in and it wouldn't really make you want to cry or make you want to throw up by looking at it. On the spot where this building is now standing used to be another example of wooden architecture of St. Petersburg. That's how it was. Again, it was just wilderness, countryside. That's it. Uh, well, and or this. It was not far from where we are again. And now it looks like that. So, and this building doesn't really stand out. It really kind of blends in with the area. And I think the architectural firm that built it won some prize, like international level something. I'm not sure, but well, that definitely that's a good example of modern architecture. And this is one of the sort of green corners or green nooks or green areas of this in this area. It's very green. It is very green, and we're just walking along the main avenue. But imagine how many gems you can find if you go into the other streets, into the alleys, and there are a bunch of places. Um, Normally those are not touristy places. That's exactly where locals live. This is exactly where the life actually goes on. This is the small park named after Mikhail Anikushin, who was an outstanding sculptor of the Soviet period and the modern Russian period. Mikhail Anikushin, I don't expect you to know his name, but every local knows because there are a bunch of monuments that were made by him, and the most recognizable one, you know it. It's the monument to Alexander Pushkin, Russian poet number one. I brought up Pushkin even today on my Tbilisi tour because there is a street named after Pushkin. So yeah, and this one, everyone knows monuments to Pushkin, and most of them were made by Anikushin. This monument is, by the way, underground. There is a Pushkin underground station, and believe it or not, this is underground. This is not a palace. This is not an estate of the 19th century. This is just a metro station. That's it. By the way, I have several videos of several underground stations. So I may actually put it all together into a tour, like a tour of the most splendid St. Petersburg underground station. Now it's not allowed to film in the stations for security reasons because of the. So, but I have videos from long time ago. Well, several years ago. I filmed them before I think it was during the pandemic when I filmed it. So yeah, let me know later on also if you're interested. So we could do that because you know, or this monument. I actually did a tour in that area once. It was one of the tours related to the revolution. I did a long series of tours, I think 10 tours altogether about the Russian Revolution. And I like this monument to Lenin. So we guides, we kind of joke that this is Lenin trying to get his Uber, and it does look like he's trying to get a cab. It does look like this. So this monument, kind of iconic Lenin monument, it was also erected by Mikhail Anikushin. So Anikushin is kind of, we know who he is, but even if you don't know the name, you actually must have seen some of those monuments on my tours. Another tenant house, maybe not so interesting from the point of view of how it looks, but it belonged to someone very honorable, and I mean Obolensky family, House of Sergei Obolensky. The Obolensky family were very close with the Romanovs. They were one of the most noble, one of the richest families in Russia. And Prince Sergei Obolensky, um, I actually mentioned him on my tours of the Russian immigration, but as you know, I never really finished with those tours because I'm kind of taking a little break. I am now preparing a series of tours on the Russian immigrants, I mean immigrants from the Russian Empire, Jews, Russians, Ukrainians, Georgians, and it's about the states because you can imagine how many eventually how many people eventually moved to the States. Maybe not immediately after revolution, but definitely in the 1930s. So there are a bunch of stories to share. I'm trying to put it all together. Again, I want to make it concise, short and sweet. I don't want to turn it into an endless 15 episode kind of series, but I also want to make sure, I tell I include everyone I want to talk about. So Sergei Abalansky had quite an interesting story, and he passed away, by the way, in Michigan. He lived a long life. He was almost 90 years when he passed away, and he had an amazing career in the U.S. Army, and also he was on the vice chairman of the board of directors of the Hilton Hotels Corporation. Who would have thought? So, but that was when he retired. And there's an interesting story also about his, like family life. By the way, his family owned this house and the one and the other one, just the next one. And many aristocratic families owned tenant houses because it was an easy way to make the money work. They would invest in building a house, and they would just leave off the rent money, and that was it. Not so much has survived, I would say. So I found some photos again on forums, in the just in public domain that I'm sharing with you. There always had to be some sort of a stove or something in these houses because even in the lobby there had to be a stove because otherwise it would have been just too cold. So Serge Bolensky married Ever Alice Muriel Astor from the Astor family, so one of the richest ladies in the States, the Astor family. He wasn't her first one, he wasn't her last husband, but they have children together, and it's quite an issue, I would say. And their photo, they didn't look very happy, but this photo made it to all the, chronicles and all the newspapers and magazines in the States when it took place. Yeah, there was a big, kind of a sensation and but as I said, there are some examples of, so to speak, old style architecture, and these houses are gems of the area. However, they no longer look like gems; they look more like, I don't know, ruins. Unfortunately, well, for example, this is the house of Vyazemsky Whites. It just means that first this house belonged to Wyazemski, and then it belonged uh, to to a German merchant. Hold on a second. I just want to make sure. Um, so and the German merchant, the Wetzer family. I think he was Robert Wetzer. There is not much information about Wetzers. We only know that the Wetzer the Wetzer family remained in St. Petersburg even when the First World War started, which was a big deal because of the First World War. A lot of German businesses suffered politically. Many things happened, and it was no longer a very friendly environment for Germans. However, there were always a lot of German families in St. Petersburg, and many German families had been living in St. Petersburg since the 18th century when Peter the Great hired, their ancestors to work in the city. So it was, for many, it was, well, these many of those families had nothing to do with Germany. They were Russian Germans, but nevertheless, but Wetzers, they remained, and but this was not just the area where they lived; it was also the area where they worked, because it was far from the downtown. There was enough space. So it was very common for many businessmen, for many merchants to live next to their manufacture site. And there was a small mechanical factory where they produced different, mechanism and details and tools. That's the building, typical red brick architecture. This building has been restored. There wasn't not so much to restore. There's no plaster. There's no need to think about that. It was just built from bricks. You cleared the bricks and everything, and now and it is rented, or at least a year ago, it was rented by some company. There was just some offices, but the big house is still in a very bad condition. Uh, then there is another house just next door, and it belonged to a French businessman, French merchant, Ernest Eagle. As I told you on my previous tours, a lot of French moved to Russia after the Great French Revolution and stayed. Some left, some stayed. So there was also quite a big French community in St. Petersburg. So Ernst Eagle actually lived in the downtown. Um, but he used this island, for his getaway. So he had his country house here, and also he opened here a restaurant, just like that. Unfortunately, it looks like that still, and it's 10 minutes by car from the downtown. But unfortunately, it looks like this. And the problem with these buildings is that, so this is clearly before Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau, it's not just the use of different and new materials, and cutting edge technologies for the decoration. It's also how you build it, metal rib constructions, metal frames. But these houses were built before that, which means most of them have wooden frames. And this is not so easy to restore. It's way easier to just tear down and rebuild in the same style, but just imagine the budgets. And this is one of the major issues when it gets down to restoring 19th century houses. Obviously, there were also ones built by in stone, but these in particular, so this kind of country houses, they would normally be built from wood, and this is a big issue. So the dacha of Ernst Eagle, the restaurant was called Ernest. So dacha, it has nothing to do with the word Dutch. No, it's basically the comes from Russian word to give. It's the land that's given to you, and this is the word that was used to the plot of land given to Russian aristocrats by Peter the Great, where they would build their country houses. So basically, it's a country house of Ernest, and it was a restaurant. So he lived here, and part of the building was an opulent, fancy, schmancy restaurant with a beautiful garden. And uh, so there is a one photo. I'm going to share it. Well, this is how the restaurant looked. I mean, you kind of have an idea, right? So very fancy, very schmancy, beautiful, beautiful glass. It looked like you are in a big orangery, and that's what it was. You see all these exotic plants, palm trees. It was a big kind of a big time restaurant, and I showed you this photo before. The thing is, we are not sure whether this is the photo of the Wetzer house or of the Eagles house. We don't know, but I guess it would work. It would look nicely with both of the places. So yeah, those were those were good days for these houses. So this photo I found it's dated 2001 or something like that. There used to be some Soviet institution there. Obviously, it was all nationalized. I know that Eagles immigrated. Well, they left Russia and they went to France. That I know for sure. And in up until 2000 something, there was still life there. And well, I mean, the ironwork is still there. Beautiful, intricate quite sophisticated design. So that was, well, beautiful uh, stained glass that you kind of have an idea. So very sad. So someone, I'm not sure whether someone broke into, but as far as I understand, it's not so difficult to get into this house, and that's another issue. So the house is being, looted, and well, all the things that come with it, so to speak. Okay, let's move on. Mm, Okay. Yeah, very sad. So I'd rather just switch to another to another story. Let's get out. Oh, really breaks my heart to see this. I know that in this room there used to be in the Soviet period there was some sort of a concert hall, but just imagine the opulence in the 19th century. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But okay, let's heal with something that looks way nicer, freshly restored another tenant house that belonged to the Obolensky family, by the way, at some point. And well, this is I would say, also a classic example of Art Nouveau. Not, I would say, kind of a European Art Nouveau. Not specifically, I would say, northern, but typical details, ladies' heads, uh, all these swirls and well, floral patterns, um, lilacs, and all these things. Pretty much, same story. What I have been able to find that, and it's interesting that this island, Petrogradsky, well, it's not a Petrogradsky, it's the Aptekersky Island, but we can say that the Petrogradsky neighborhood, because the name of the neighborhood is still Petrogradsky anyway. It comes from the name of the city during well, after the First World War. It was renamed from St. Petersburg into Petrograd, just not to sound too German. And this is where the island got its name, Petrogradsky Island. We know, for example, that several car companies had their garages, had their shops in this island because there was enough space. And also, we know that, for example, the English Daimler cars had their dealer office in St. Petersburg. Here, by the way, it's kind of an ad, and they claim that from their shop you could buy the car with the silent engine. Don't know. By the way, I'm not sure whether it was true, but I think so. The only thing is that I know that not the very first, but some of the very, very first traffic lights, because of the abundance of these car shops and garages, actually appeared in what will be set up in this island also. And by the way, also the first tenant houses with garages, for cars, not for horses and carriages, also would be built in this area because of that. So again, fancy schmancy neighborhood, very fancy. Even nowadays, some photos from the locals. Also, people who live in these houses, they sometimes like to share photos of their lobbies because most of the lobbies they're closed and it's not so easy to get in unless you live there. So, but yeah, people gladly, well, okay, maybe not so gladly, not everyone, but in general, there are people who would gladly share with the beautiful, lobbies they live in. The photos. This is my one of my absolute favorites. This is the Zimmerman house. It belonged to a certain Zimmerman, another merchant, a commissioner. It was built by Lidwall. This architect we know very well. So Zimmerman, that's uh, the name of the commissioner. This is the perfect example of Northern Art Nouveau, I would say. But instead of the dark stone on the facade, this is the use of tiles, Maiolica tiles, glazed tiles. They are brown. They They're shiny, they're so glossy. You can't see it from here, but one of the ideas, so, well, Fodor Lidwall, by the way, he was Swedish, and he was born in St. Petersburg to Swedish parents. But he was, I would say, he was very, um, he considered himself Russian, but up until a certain point, after the revolution, he left for Stockholm, and he lived a long life, and he was a very prolific architect. He started in St. Petersburg. He built gazillions of buildings in St. Petersburg. He was one of the most popular and expensive architects, and he specialized on Art Nouveau. Absolutely, it was his favorite style, and well, he was versatile because well, he started with Art Nouveau, and yes, he was very good at it. But we also need to understand there were other styles that also developed alongside Art Nouveau. And when the First World War started, there was less demand for Art Nouveau. There was no really time, and there was no interest in Art Nouveau. Um, he managed to adjust. He was very versatile. He built multiple buildings in St. Petersburg. This house, the Tolstoy house, we saw when we sailed on the Fontanka River, if you remember. As you know, the my tour recordings, and there are more than 800 of them now, are available for my sponsors, which is the $10 monthly payment, extra to the tips. It's just it grants you access to those 800 tour videos. St. Petersburg, Israel, Amsterdam, and Georgia, and other places that I visited throughout this almost 5 years. And also, once in a couple of months, we do get-togethers. So hopefully in November, I will be able, well, early November, I'll be able to put it all together for another get-together. So, but I'm not going into details about the other houses he built. But as I said, when he moved to Stockholm after the revolution, he very quickly found a job there, and he was very prolific. There are a bunch of buildings he built in Sweden. I don't know these places. I've never been to Sweden, but I can tell you this is not St. Petersburg. This is Sweden for sure. And well, this is Lilval, but he started in St. Petersburg. It doesn't have to be every time Art Nouveau. So very different. And he lived a long life. I think he passed away in after the Second World War. So a long life he lived. So, but Zimmermann House is one of my favorite built by Fodor Lidwall, and in general, I would say it's one of my favorite. And look, so Art Nouveau is also define all the principles of classicism, no symmetry, the beauty of the facade as well as the beauty of the backyard. Also, the inside decoration have kind of need to match the also the facade design. Look at all these windows. They're so different. Not the window frames, okay, some are plastic, some are wooden, but I prefer all of them to be wooden, and I'm not sure why not all of them are of the same style. But and look at these old photos. Just incredible. Gorgeous building, absolutely gorgeous. And it actually, that's the story. So there was a tower. As you can see, there was a tower. Like just the cherry on top. But unfortunately, it didn't survive the Second World War. The house was not damaged, but well, after the war, the tower disappeared. I'm not sure what happened to it. I don't know whether there are plans to restore it. Probably not. But I mean, look at this irregularity. Look how everything is perfectly asymmetrical. I see some harmony in the way how asymmetrical the house is. And look at all these decorations and different, well, it's the tile work and the plaster and the different arabesque designs. And I like the entrance. It's like a kind of entrance. I can't even like find the word for it. It's like solid, dark granite. It's very kind of it gives you a little bit of a northern. brutal northern touch, something like that. Well, at least that's how it looks to me, and I'm pretty sure that's what he also tried to convey. We can't see it from here because the house was under renovation when it was filmed. Nevertheless, I think we can see the enough of beauty in it. The house next to it was built by another architect. I don't think you know of him. That's okay if you don't. Again, it's not about remembering, the names and so on. But Vladimir Shuko, well, he is well Shuko's biography. It's not a tour about, archetypes, but it's about different stories that make it kind of more interesting for us to watch. It's amazing how Shuko managed to adjust to the new reality. When the revolution happened, he had already been quite an accomplished architect, but still he was very young and very active, and he decided to stay in the country. It's not like he welcomed the revolution, but he decided to stay. And he adjusted, he kind of sensed the wind of change, and this house was built for Markov by Shuko before the revolution, and it was built approximately at the same time. Zimmerman House was built in 1907. This is like 1908, but clearly a very different style, like it's neoclassicism, also very northern. You can see that clearly inspired uh, by, I'm pretty sure, some, it's really hard to tell whether it's just an, ancient Greek or Roman architecture, but clearly something, something that goes back to the antiquities. And but the inside the house is like it was built with all these top-notch things inside. Absolutely. Like in general, I would say that Petrogradsky Island was the most developed neighborhood with all the facilities, electricity, the sewage system, but local sewage system, but still, yeah, the sewage system. And it was like elevators, and bunch of other things. Thank you so much, Dolores, for the tips. Thank you, dear. Yes, and Shuko, he managed to stay afloat well during this kind of challenging times after the revolution, but then he little by little, but he started getting more and more commissions, and he kind of adjusted to the new market. Uh, okay, one can say that he kind of adjusted to the new reality, and he complied with the new regime. Well, it's not about that. It's just that he managed to switch to and match the demands of the, I would say, very different audience, very different times, and he continued to do what he did really well and he loved the most. So, but this is, I see, well, as I can say, very this avenue is very eclectic, not just because of the eclectic architecture, but also because of the, I would say, stories, the times, the period it encompasses. And I also like the architecture. Well, I mean, the inside decoration. Look at this. I mean, neoclassicism. It could have been any style from the inside, but it matches the facade. Very neoclassicism, right? Opulent, very expensive. So these are the photos from. I'm not sure they were taken before the revolution, but I'm not sure which year it was. Well, this is just the apartments in this house, which I find gorgeous, gorgeous. And that's what it looks nowadays. Again, some local people who live in this house just shared the photos. This is just the lobby. They use these steps up and down every day, many times a day. I'm not sure what they are doing here on this medallion. It's really hard to tell. Well, much. And I assume these details were gilded at some point, but now they're all covered with this plaster, I believe. And this is kind of a small dome illustration. I don't know what exactly there is, but Well, it's not in a very good condition. This is the photo from 2010s. So they may have restored it already. It's really hard to tell. And by the way, this house is a continuation of the Markov's house. It was also built together with the Markov, and Markov was also an engineer, by the way, himself. So Shuko and Markov, they kind of worked together on this project. And this looks to me more like Stalin Art Nouveau even, but it was also built before the revolution. And you know, Stalin Art Nouveau, this is the style. Well, not Stalin Art Nouveau, Empire style, but this is before Stalin. This is like kind of kind of a predecessor maybe because it looks very similar. Before I actually did some digging into this house because it always kind of puzzled me. I was absolutely sure it was built in the Stalin period, but it was not. It was built before the revolution and by the same architect. Very interesting. So maybe he kind of foretold, maybe he kind of foresaw what would be in demand some 15 years later, 20 years later. Who knows? Okay. So this is time to wrap it up. I know we also skipped the Q&A and well, this is a logical place to stop and put it on hold. The chat is open for your questions if you have them. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And thank you for your interest in my tours. I don't expect this tour to be a sold out. Actually, no tours are sold out, but nevertheless, well, this is kind of a very off-beaten spots of St. Petersburg, and I like to go there myself and miss those places. So we kind of walk with you together. Thank you, Dorley. Thank you, Sharon. So, in case you missed the live walk with my mom a couple of hours ago, the link is there. The next episode for St. Petersburg walks. Um, you worked for a Halloween tour of Jewish cemetery. Very good. Zimmerman, not necessarily. I don't know. Zimmerman is not necessarily a Jewish last name. So Kaplun is definitely a Jewish man. Zimmerman, not necessarily. I haven't looked into it, but I may. We'll see. This. So when I actually looked into it, there was not much information. So I don't expect them to have found something. But actually, I might be proven wrong, and I would be glad to. So I will look it up. But um, hold on a second. So, yeah, so Jewish cemetery for Halloween. Why not? It's not so much about the spooks, but spooks as well. I mean, just going to the cemetery is quite spooky, but it's about the stories too. So we kind of killing two birds with one stone. And the two other tours for tonight in 90 minutes from now, Leon Thermain, and then the Amber Room Mystery for tomorrow, another Billy's to Walk with Mom, then Henkin Brothers story, hopefully the final episode, then Misha's tour about rise of Vladimir Putin to power. And the last tour for tomorrow, the fourth one, would be Holy Sepulchre Church. Thank you, Dolores. You're also interested in the Jewish cemetery tour. So why not? Let's go there. Let's explore. And I'm also thinking to share the, kind of the playlist of Halloween themed tours from the last year. I did quite a marathon. There were a lot of tours, very interesting ones, such as the Funeral Practices Museum in Novosibirsk, very interesting collection with the items from all over the world, spanning several centuries. Well, could be interesting. Thank you, Ronnie. Okay, Maria, got it. And yes, the asymmetrical stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Asymmetry is really a thing. You're right. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you very soon. You missed that went to the USA military. Serge Obolensky. I think this is how you would spell it. I'm not sure if there is I and Y in the end. I never know. But Obolensky. Yeah, he was actually, yes, he was, yeah, I can say he was a prince. Yeah, why not? He was not a grand duke. He was kind of a prince. Yes, it's probably the easiest way to translate it into English. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I will look into a Timmerman family if I find anything. I am not sure. I don't think he was Jewish, um, because there are too many Jewish, houses. I mean, houses that belong to the Jews. And again, I told you that there there were a lot of restrictions. So, but it could be. I mean, it could be possible again because those could be just very, kind of a top class merchants with a good annual income which would let them stay in the city and run the business and live and everything. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for your support as well. You have links for everything, my PayPal to buy me a coffee. You have the links for the website too, with the updated schedule. And there are a lot of tours, by the way, scheduled even for the upcoming weeks. And that's where you will be also able to find the links for my birthday tours, my Halloween tours, and a lot more. Thank you for everything. I will see you 90 minutes from now on the third tour of the evening. Bye bye.